Hi, sir. How are you and where are you from?
I'm doing great, and I'm from Vietnam.
How is Japan different from Vietnam?
Well, that's a lot, but I mean, I can go on all day, but I think people want to know, like, how is it different in terms of society? I think compared to Vietnam, I think Japan is a lot more convenient, but also, what? I think there are different types of roles that you can play into society, and because Japan has done such a great job developing and catering to different things, like I said, it's very convenient, and you can find anything you want here. But I think another thing I find is that Vietnam is a bit more lax compared to Japan, and the way I mean by that is that in terms of language, just purely, I think there are a couple of rules that can get in the way of natural social interactions. For example, in Japanese we have keigo, which is like the respectful of honorific. In other languages like Vietnamese, I don't think we have that, and I don't think the same thing in American languages like English or Anglo-Saxon language. I think. And another thing is that there's the senpai and the kohai prefix. In most Asian languages like Korean, Chinese, or Vietnamese, I think we have that kind of prefix to like how old or like how like your social status basically. But in English, you don't see that. For example, you can be older than me, or I can be like older than you, but we say you and I. There's no difference. We're equals. So that's what I would say in terms of society. In terms of environment, then, well, both countries are beautiful, but I think Japan has a lot more natural beauty.
You said you could get anything in Japan. What did you mean by that?
I think Japan is considered to be one of the top 10 global cities. So that means it has a great variety of activities as well as cultural activities that you can partake in. For example, if you want like Peruvian food, I think you can find a place for that. If you want Mexican food, you can find a place for that. If you want to interact with people from different countries, there are clubs or social gatherings or meetups that you can go to, and it's a constant evolving city. So there's no shortage of activities that you can partake in. That's what I meant. And also, if you're a fan of any type of fandoms or any type of subcultures, you can also find things that relate to you. For example, anime fans have it good. I mean, anime is from Japan, so you guys have it good. But also, like other things like movies or books, plenty of things to do in Japan, in Tokyo specifically, and Osaka even.
So, as a Vietnamese person in Japan, have you experienced anything that's unique to the Vietnamese experience in Japan?
Yeah, I think, yeah. For example, I think it's kind of odd on the train, for example, because in Vietnam we were raised from birth, quote unquote, from birth to give our seats to elderlies or children when we're on the trains. But here in Japan, when we try to do that, I think a lot of Japanese elderlies, they find that to be offensive, like, oh, do you think I'm not capable or something like that? But I think it's just different cultural aspect. I think perhaps in a way, I think Japanese people are more independent compared to Vietnamese. And maybe there's a different kind of familial connections too, because I think if you ask a lot of Japanese youth, like Gen Z or like my age, I think they would say that they like to be independent more. So maybe that could be something that's different compared to Vietnam. Another thing is there are some social rules I find it to, again, kind of restricting natural interactions. For example, in Vietnam, you can talk on public transportations or like be more yourself in public spaces. But even in some public spaces in Japan, I think there's still like an inclination to keep to yourself or to be, mindful of your volume. So those are some of the things that I find to be interesting or, well, cultural shock, let's say.
Okay. What advice would you give to other Vietnamese people who are thinking about coming to Japan?
Well, first thing first, I think you should definitely just study Japanese because it makes life easier. I'm not saying that you need to know Japanese to be successful in Japan because it really depends on the kind of industry you're in as well. For example, I think if you do academic like me, then it depends on the program you're taking or like the institution that you're enrolled in. Or if you want to be an English teacher, then that's and if you already know English, then that's good. But again, Japanese, it allows you to communicate with others. It allows you to communicate with locals. So that's my first advice. Second advice, be prepared for any cultural shocks. Remember, this is the host country. You're a guest. So do your best to be mindful and respectful of the host's cultures and, be a good guest, I would say.
What was the biggest adjustment you had to make while living in Japan?
I think, well, I wouldn't say adjustment, but I think some of the skills I've learned, I would say. One is budgeting, because before that I used to live with my family, and so what I had was allowances. So when I came to Japan, I obviously had to, plan my schedules and my spending a little bit more carefully. So I think that's one skills I've picked up, and I think it's served me well to have that, since you cannot be too careful with money. I'd say another adjustment, I wouldn't say skill, but adjustment, is that I'm more communicative with my family now. Because when you're in Japan, the amount of time you spend with your family could be difficult, especially consider the time zone. I'm fortunate because Vietnam and Japan only has a 2-hour time difference, so it's easy to schedule our calls. But I think a good thing about that is because you're more active in terms of communicating with your family, you become better at communicating with your family. So maybe different problems you have had in the past that you weren't comfortable, it starts to come out in a more natural way because you're actively trying communicating and engaging with your family. So that would be the two adjustment, let's say, that I've made since coming to Japan.
Do you think you could make more money in Japan or in Vietnam?
Again, I think it depends on one's personal experience. I think if you go on like
All else is equal.
if all else is equal, okay. I think if you go with employer kind of track, then I think you can definitely make more money in Japan. One, because exchange rate, but two, I think Japan has a higher living standard, and because of that, the living wages is much higher. And also, if you're a skilled laborer, then you definitely make use of that. But if you're, for example, you're an entrepreneur, or if you want to go into political or academic track, then I think it depends on. Honestly, it depends on you. But generally speaking, I think you would make more money living in Japan.
Would you consider starting a family in Japan?
Would I consider starting a family in Japan? That would actually be a no for me. I know it could sound weird because Japan has so many benefits, like when it comes to childbearing and paternity and maternity, not leave, but like I say, social rewards for that. But like I said, I have a pretty personal connection to my family in Vietnam, and I do want my my child to be brought up in that community and that environment. So even though there are a lot of benefits to Japan, I think I'd still bring my family back to our roots. But that's my personal preference.
What are two things you wish you knew about Japan before coming here?
Honestly, I wouldn't say there are much. But I think, like I said, I wish I had studied Japanese more. I wish I had known that English was not as, let's say, popular or used widely in Japan as I thought it would be. And I had to be open to experience new things. Because honestly, when you come into a new environment, it's best to have an open mind to experience new things and learn new things. That would be it.
Barry, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here.